Welcome to Inside IT Automation, a ScriptRunner production.
All right, so welcome everyone to today's Inside IT Automation episode with none other than Doug Finke. I guess it's going to be a fun and interesting one. We're going to touch on a couple of topics, and I think we're also going to see a few things. So that sounds pretty interesting. And I think before we start and dig into the topics, for those of you who might not know Doug, maybe you can give us a little introduction, and maybe you can tell us what outfit you're wearing today, because that looks really cool.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me, Heiko. I'm really glad to be here. Always good to chat with you about ranges of topics, but we'll keep it focused on PowerShell and IT automation. We might go off here and there. Yeah. So this is Mr. Picard's Star Trek. I just got off the holodeck, and I figured since we're going to probably talk about artificial intelligence, I thought this was an appropriate outfit to wear when we get to that, if and when we get to that topic.
Perfect.
So as an introduction, for folks who don't know me, my name's Doug Finke. I've been an MVP for Microsoft for 15 times. I don't like saying 15 years, but I said it anyway. And so I've been around PowerShell since it was called Monad. And I got addicted to it, and I've been doing things ever since. A couple of things that I'm known for is my, which we'll talk about, is my Microsoft Excel PowerShell integration module, which automates Excel. And we'll see some of that later. And another one, my recent one, is I've actually brought ChatGPT into the PowerShell console with my PSAI module, which I find is super exciting. A lot of people are interested in it. I had it under a different name up until a week or two ago. I had about 70,000 downloads, and now people are finding the new one and they're moving over to it. So those are two of the things in the PowerShell space. And just to throw it in, I've been around the industry for about 100 years, back when we used to chisel things into rock and feed that to the computer. So I've been around for a while. And
you were punching cards and things like that. And you are running the New York PowerShell User Group, right?
That is correct. So I have if you get up on Meetup, and you can look up the New York City PowerShell User Group, I have people like Heiko. He comes on every once in a while and talks about stuff with ScriptRunner, what's going on. And I have other speakers, and I also do live streams. I talk about all kinds of technology at least once a month, mostly focused in the recent ones on AI. And I also have a series called 2.5 Geeks, which is I get on with somebody else who's been doing AI for a bit, whether in the PowerShell space or not, and we geek out on AI and the new things, and we chat with AI and see what different ways of prompting and understanding how AI works. So yeah, head over there, sign up, and you'll see when I post the next meeting.
Very cool. So, and we will definitely add the links to the description of the video.
Cool.
For sure. So that you can find all the sources. But as you just mentioned, you already started when this wasn't even PowerShell, it was called Monad. So so let's say, like, I don't know, 16 years later, 17 years later, did you expect PowerShell to expand into something like what we see today?
That's a great question. I don't think, I come from the world of the mainframe, so I know things like CList and Rex. I used DOS, and I used Unix, and I used, VBScript and WScript and host. And I've used different command line tools for lots of different operating systems. And I never imagined that PowerShell would grow to be as intertwined into all different backyards as it is today. The thing that caught me about PowerShell, and I just was mentioning this to somebody, is I first saw Jeffrey Snover and Jim Truer back when it was called Monad doing a presentation on Monad, and Jeffrey Snover did his classic, get process, pipe it, and he wanted to find out where each process had more than 700 handles, so pipe it to where curly brace $_.handles -GT 700, and he started talking about how they're passing objects over the pipeline, not text. when he said that, that was what hooked me into. I was like, what do you mean you're passing objects over a pipeline? Because up until then, for 30 years, we only knew text. So that just, caught my attention. And then I was like, this thing has a lot of potential. And where it is today, I don't think it's gone far enough, but PowerShell, I think it's, but it's amazing what was built and what it does today. Quite impressive.
Yeah, I think so too. And so what would you wish they would add to PowerShell as it is? Is there anything that comes to mind immediately?
Absolutely. We'll try to keep it calm. Yeah, at one point, I think they even hired somebody who was like a JavaScript engineer in the JavaScript space back in the day, and they were looking at bringing PowerShell to the browser, to the web browser, so you could write web pages in JavaScript or in PowerShell like you do JavaScript. Okay. That would have been really cool if we had that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So fleshing out some more of the pieces. So I take a lot of my cues from Python, right? I look at the Python world and I go, what are they doing? And they're always doing something cool. And there's a bunch of things like pandas, for example. Pandas is a great analytics library on the Python side. I've actually ported a bunch of those pieces into PowerShell, but there's certain things you can't do that Python can do so I wish there was a better mix, a better flow of how you could develop PowerShell like they have in how we could do better in PowerShell the way Python works, like decorators and things like that, where you can take a function in PowerShell and put just like an @ little statement on top, and it does a whole bunch of different things for you inside PowerShell. So, but it didn't go in that direction. It would have been really cool if they did, I think.
Yeah. But even without that, I think it's
incredible.
Yeah, and talking about incredible. The last time we had a conversation like this, we were also talking about your ImportExcel module, and I think it was last year, and I think the downloads from the PowerShell gallery was kind of 2.6 million. And the last time I checked, I think last week, it was like 5.2 million downloads of your ImportExcel module. What do you say about that?
Well, thanks for noticing. Yeah, it's mind blowing for me. I mean, I call it ImportExcel because when I first checked it into GitHub and published it, all I could do was import with it. That's all I thought I was going to do. And then it grew into exporting and all these different kinds of things. And then some people started contributing and all that. And I went from getting like 10,000. That was like in 2015. So that's like, it's almost like 10 years old. And, I would get a bunch of people, I'd watch the numbers. And then after a few years, I was starting to get like 10,000 downloads a month. And I think, like you said, I checked last week and I think I had $1.5 million. Yeah, that'd be a good deal.
That would be great. Yeah.
1.5 million downloads like in like a 6-week period of time.
Wow.
And I'm like thinking, I got to talk to the PowerShell team. I think their numbers are wrong. But yeah, and I get emails from all over the world privately. I get stuff on my on the repo, questions, thanking, like how it saved your funds, how they look great to management. So yeah, it's been it was a fun project to build, and I'm amazed that people got interested in it. So
and what was the initial motivation to do it when you start building it?
Oh, dude, we don't have time.
Okay, so you had a problem to solve where you thought I need a module for that.
It's funny. Like I've known about Excel since it came out, and I thought, and I remember looking it up, and I think Excel came on the market in the 1980s. I hate to say, and I was a Lotus 123 person at the time, and then somebody showed me Microsoft Excel, and I was like, I just love that kind of stuff for some reason, and so I was always looking at the way Python works is that you can actually take an array of numbers. You can take an X with an array of numbers, Y with an array of numbers, and you hand that to something called like matplot, right? And you say, give me a plot. Here's the title. Here's the axes, all that kind of stuff. And then you hit the button and it shows, and it pops up a window, like a regular WinForm window, but it's a Python piece. And I'm like, I always work with data, and I always want to do analysis, and I want to see charts, and I want to see all kinds of ways that I can slice and dice it. How come I don't have that in PowerShell? So for even before 2015, I was like always looking for ways to make that easier. Am I going to go to a web page? I can use those kind of, I can get all the data set up and then push it to a browser, or I can then try to do WinForms, or I can try and do WPF. And I had tried a bunch of different things. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and see if I can automate Excel. And at the time we had the -com, right? You could do a new object space, -com space Excel application. And that would launch Excel in the background. And then you could actually control Excel from PowerShell at the command line or in a script. And I was like, okay, and start poking data in. Of course, I was a VBA expert because I loved Excel back in the 90s. So I figured I knew the object model. I was like, oh, you could do a bunch of really cool things. But it was always brittle because if I gave that to a user, then the user could accidentally click on it or hit the X button, and close out from Excel and have all kinds of problems. And I was like, okay, this is cute, not interested. It's not gonna be a solid solution. And then one day I was like, well, maybe I can read the Excel files directly. Too much beer the night before. So I was like, so I started searching around how to do that. And I came across a library, a DLL that Microsoft put out when they were sued by the government for being having too much control in the Windows space. They said, okay, you have to open source the storage of Excel, and all the Office products have to be XML based. So I came across a library that they built that could actually interact with the XML and do things with the Excel files. And another couple of guys actually took it and really took it a bunch of steps further. And I was like, let me try that. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, I can control Excel almost every aspect, creating pivot tables, creating charts, creating filters, doing data analysis, all kinds of updating sheets, create 500, all kinds of different things without launching Excel and having that problem. And like, oh, wow, that means I could run this on a server without having installing Excel. And then just the idea is just like, well, what else can I enable inside of PowerShell? And yeah, it took shape.
Yeah, and here we are, 5.2 million downloads. I mean, this,
Exactly.
Obviously people like it. And we have a little project running at the site at the moment where this is part of, and it's awesome. Creating pivot table is always can be a pain. So what would you say is are the coolest things that people can do with the module?
Well, I'll tell you what I think is cool, but I'm pretty biased because I like the way I do my data analysis the way I do it. But so doing pivot tables, like if I have one sheet with all my transactions, let's say if I'm working in a store and I want to have all my transactions and what products were sold, what date, all that kind of stuff, I can easily say, make that a pivot table, and I can say, and the way the function works, it'll recognize the date time for the dates and time, and it breaks it out into month, day, year, quarter, all that kind of stuff. So now I can actually take the numbers, right? Take the numerics, like the total sales, total units sold, all that, and it puts it into a nice pivot table that I can sit there and say, oh, in quarter 2, I sold 500 PV sets, right? Stuff like that. And then I can actually, once that's loaded, I can actually use PowerShell to change those and pivot those dimensions, right? So I can say, well, I don't want to see the dates on the left. I want to see the dates on the top, and I want to see the types on the left and which store was it, right? And that's like not even 2 parameters on a call. And then you take, once that's set up, you say, oh, create a chart from that, put it on the same page. So in like a few lines of code, you're exporting your data, you have it set up in a pivot table with a chart, and you're golden. I think it's amazing. And then you give it to your manager and they go, oh, wow, I can move it around too. Like, yeah, where's my raise? But anyway.
Awesome. So I guess everyone who is just kind of seriously using Excel should definitely look into it. And as you mentioned, I also know a lot of people who say, oh, well, I'm using it every day, and it helps me saving time and automating all kind of manual stuff.
It also works with reading Excel. So you might actually be in, like, I know people who reach out to me here in Wall Street and they say, we have like 50, 100 Excel XLX workbooks, and each one of them have 25 different sheets in it, and we have to go manually and then extract data from each one of them, copy paste this into another Excel spreadsheet. Well, that's a perfect thing for my ImportExcel to work with. You can read up, right? You do a DIR, start on XLSX, you can read in all that data, and then you can then munge it all together with PowerShell, and then you can then export it into a new Excel. So lots of ways to slice and dice this thing. And it can go on and on and on.
Yeah, that's really awesome. But but of course, so that's what you did a while back, and then last year, I think it was, then you started to build the module around AI and ChatGPT. So how did this start to happen?
Wow, man. Yeah, so I was looking back and I was at my notes, and I think it was 2021. Yeah, I love doing early adoption, which I think showed, I was I was working with Monad before it became PowerShell. I was working with Microsoft Thunder before they released it as Visual Basic. And that's 100 years ago. So I just like I spend my weekends looking for new products to play with and then see if things make sense to continue. So I got access to GitHub Copilot in 2021. I'm not even sure if it was called that. And I started working with it, and there was nothing out there talking about, oh, here's how you do prompting. Here's this. It was like, okay, here, we have a new idea. Try it out. And I would sit inside of Visual Studio Code after a month or two, didn't even realize that the product was installed. I was like, I didn't really know how to use it. A couple of buttons you can do. They were updating it frequently. But all of a sudden, like if I would type in like the word function in a Visual Studio Code PowerShell file, I would type in function space. Copilot would give me a suggestion. And I'm like, how does it know that I'm working in my Excel stuff? And how did it know to come up with that suggestion? And why? Because I named a file something, and it picked up the context, which I didn't know at the time, that it was PowerShell, the file name, and the directory I was in. And all of a sudden it was giving me these suggestions. And I was like, this is crazy. What is it doing? Fast forward 8 months, ChatGPT on the web came out, which was something that GitHub Copilot was supposedly using. Started playing with that, and it started this thing. Well, you just ask it questions, and I started asking it stuff, and it was like, again, I had the aha ChatGPT moment. Like, oh, I can say, what do you know about PowerShell and exporting stuff into Excel? It didn't know my module in the first month, right? But it would use the -com, and within 2 months, that was my litmus test. I would go back to it over a couple of months, and I'd say, can you export it without using -com? And all of a sudden, one day it goes, yeah, we'll use the ImportExcel module. I'm like, what is this? I think it's alive. So go forward a couple of more months, Microsoft Build, they show a demonstration where you could use ChatGPT from the command line using Python. And I'm like, how did they do that? And then they even gave a PowerShell demonstration of using ChatGPT from the command line. So of course I immediately tracked down the code. They put it up open source, and I looked at it. And the unfortunate thing was the PowerShell was calling the Python code, and I'm like, I don't want to have to go to every machine that I work on and have to install Python first to get this thing to work. So I was like, all right, let me see if I can figure out how they're doing this directly. So I started looking at how they interacted with ChatGPT on the web. And I'm like, oh, this looks pretty straightforward. And so I built my first prototype of just communicating through the REST APIs to ChatGPT. And the story that I tell is I got it working. I made it open source. And then the first thing I did was I contacted Steve Lee on the PowerShell team. You know Steve.
Yeah, sure.
So I said, hey, Steve, I checked in this thing. Did you see that demo talking ChatGPT on the console? Well, I ported it all native to PowerShell, and I checked it in today. And then he writes back, he goes, yeah, I checked mine in yesterday. I'm like, what? So he had seen the same demo, and he started down that path. And from then on, it was like I was completely addicted to AI. If that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know.
Yeah, and then, okay, then you had the PowerShell AI module first, right? That I started using actually last year. And but since then, now can you change it to PowerShell AI Assistant, and now it's PSAI. Yeah.
Yep. So if you want to do an install module called PSAI, that's the latest, greatest, combined everything. And the reason that happened was OpenAI has changed their SDK 3 times. And if you go up to their website, you can always see that this is preview, this is beta. So getting into this, I knew, okay, if I'm going to continue on this path, I'm going to have to stay up with them. And they're beasts. They churn out code like crazy. So the first version approached chatting in one way. The second version, they upped the game. And then this last version, they're adding all kinds of new things like vector stores and all kind of stuff. So you can actually chat with your data, what they call RAG principles, which is a retrieval augmented generation process, which sounds all scary and whatnot, but don't worry. It's not that hard. And I just posted on Twitter today a demo of something I'm building called PS Chat Docs. And you can say PS Chat Docs space star.pdf and then say, what are these PDFs about? And that's it. And it'll upload everything. It'll vectorize and do the embeddings, and then you can ask that question. It comes back, oh, this is all about yoga, whatever it's going to be about.
Okay. And you also posted something about make it easier to understand or write regex, right?
That is true. So ChatGPT has something called custom GPTs, and you can build a custom GPT where you basically steer the model into doing what you want. Right. And it's not, I don't think it's a tough technique, but then again, I've been doing it for 3 years. So not that specifically. So I have a thing called PowerShell Regex Buddy. I think I call it the wizard, PowerShell Regex Wizard. So I tuned it so that it only talks about PowerShell, only regexes. And the cool thing is that I make it so it can interact. So if it doesn't understand what you want to do, it'll ask you. And so you can do something like, hey, I need a regex that does emails. And it'll go, sure, here's a regex. Let me explain the pieces to you so that you understand how it works. And then, okay, cool. And at the end of it, it'll say, would you like to have some pester tests for that? So it'll also generate pester tests to test the regex. The next step that's really cool is if you, let's say you don't, you have like phone numbers, like maybe you have phone numbers from across the world, right? It's different in Europe, it's different in the United States, and the phone numbers are, structured differently. You could take here's a European phone number, here's a US phone number, here's one from South America. Just take those 3 phone numbers, give it to the regex wizard that I built, say, I need a regex that matches each one of these. And it'll come back with a single pattern that can match. And then it says, would you like pester tests for that? Yes, I would. And you're off to the races.
Okay. Wow, that's really cool. I think that would be a good time maybe to show a little bit about your module, so people can kind of get an idea what they can do with it. So I will.
Which one would you like first? Excel?
I would say let's start with the AI stuff. I would say. What do you think? So whatever you are comfortable with.
Okay, let's happy to start with AI. So let's do a ScriptRunner in case we need stuff.
And I'm going to
Okay, cool. So out of the box, if you download, and let me just type that in here, install module, right? So if you do an install module on PSAI, that'll give you everything you need. The only next step that you need to do is go off, if you go to the repo, and you can find out how to get a key from OpenAI. If you install it and don't have the key set, it'll prompt you, or it'll error out and say, go to this website and get a key. If you put $5 down for it, it needs your credit card, easily cancelable. It's basically a Microsoft company. You put $5 in, you probably won't even use it in the next year. That for $5.
Yeah, and I think what people sometimes are a little bit confused is that there's ChatGPT, but for the OpenAI, for the API calls, this is a different licensing, right? So, and that's what's necessary for the module.
It's a little bit different licensing. That's true, because you're using it. It's a pay as you go in a sense, but you have to buy credits. But it's a pay as you go. But it's exactly the same models that ChatGPT uses.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And it's the same exact models that Microsoft uses for Edge and the Bing chat and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's the same models, but yeah, you pay for it a little differently.
And I think I think when I remember correctly, it works with talking directly to the OpenAI, but it also works with Azure, right?
Dude, you know my product better than I do. Absolutely. And on the website, on the GitHub repo, it shows you. So Microsoft basically takes whatever the latest and greatest that OpenAI does. It takes them about a month or two, but then they onboard it into Azure, and they call it Azure OpenAI AI Services, which basically gives you the comfort of if you buy into that service, you now have all the same models that OpenAI has, but it's behind a tenant and it's on a DoD protected type mentality of
secure
inside
environment.
Exactly. And with this module, it's a couple parameters that you set up because you have to point to the endpoints over there. And this module works with Azure OpenAI.
Perfect.
Cool. So let's take it for a little bit of a spin. So we're not going to have time to show you how the sausage is made, but we'll just show you some uses. So there's a function I have called AI. So you can just be at a PowerShell console, and this will also work in your scripts as well. So you could actually come up with little things to for yourself or for users that they can type in something, call your function, and underneath it could call and chat to GPT about it. So you can do something like AI, tell me about elephants. How's that for an opening? And it goes off. And it can come back and tell you about that kind of stuff. Now, if I come in here and I say something like, and that's, it's not a very verbose response, but you can ask it to be a little more verbose. I can also say something like, what were the January employment numbers? No, and I'm going to leave the misspelling because actually GPT will take what I said, internally correct it, even for grammar. But now notice it says, I'm sorry, I'm not able to provide real-time or current data. You can check back, you can check the latest employment numbers from blah, blah, blah. So yes, I don't want this to become a talk about how models are trained, but there is a certain level of training that happens that it can't get to real-time information. But that's okay, and it's not. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there are some new features that they're dropping from OpenAI that's enabling things like Bing's search engine capabilities and whatnot, so you can get real-time data. But that's just kind of like level set. Like, okay, what is AI? People will go up and do this kind of thing, and they'll go, "Oh, I can't get this. I can go to Google and get it. AI is useless." But let's do some other things. Let's play around and say list the first 5 U.S. presidents. And sorry, I'm going to use the U.S. based stuff. So that's kind of cool. And I could now extend my prompt, right? So what I'm doing is I'm prompting the model. You could think of prompting as I'm programming the model by telling it what I want and how I want it. So I'm going to say I want the 5 presidents, VP, term, comma, party. Now that's kind of, ambiguous, right? It's like if I was talking to somebody in a conversation, somebody might go, well, I don't know what he's talking about. And sure enough, here's George Washington. John Adams was the vice president. And that's when, that's the term, 1789 to 97. And the initial one was, there was no political party. Now, I'm going to show you a trick with prompting. So I can keep the same prompt, and all I have to do is say is as markdown table. So if you're familiar with Markdown, there's a way that you can set up Markdown tables that get rendered in interesting, And now you see, now I didn't program it for that. I'm just passing your prompt straight through to GPT. I'm going to come over here and create a new file inside of Visual Studio Code. I paste that Markdown. Now if I want to render it, you can hopefully see on the right. So I use this a lot. Like if I'm doing analysis or I'm comparing products or I want to go deeper on certain types of things, even my own data, I'll sit there and I'll say, what's the first precedence? Give me these attributes about the thing I'm talking about. And then when I'm happy, I'll add as markdown table.
Yeah.
What's really cool is I can say as JSON. Just another. So now I can sit here and ask all these kind of questions, and then I can have the model come back with what kind of format I want. Now that's actual parsable JSON, right?
I mean, this is a real time saver, right? For all this formatting stuff.
Why would, imagine if I had to get a bunch of mock data, or I wanted to look up a bunch of stuff from any website or whatever it's been trained on. I can actually get this information and then I can have it come out in CSV. So, and see what happens. So there's lots of ways you can take information, either have it look it up, or I can feed data into AI. That didn't really work well. So there goes the first demo. That's what happens when you demo with AI. You never know what you're going to get. But yes, you can actually sit here and say as markdown, as this, as that. You can ask for specific ways that it gets formatted. And the cool thing is that this kind of prompting, it's not limited to what I built, and it's not limited to OpenAI. If you want to use Claude from Anthropic, or you want to use Gemini from Google, these same kind of prompts will work with their models as well. So this is the whole concept of prompt engineering. What I'm bringing to the table is this AI capability. So where to?
And this is kind of, especially the example with the employment rate. I mean, would be like in another scenario could be, of course, a great fit with what you do with your ImportExcel, because if a company has this data in the Excel sheets, then that would be the source, and you could use that for your analyzing processes, right?
That would be exactly correct. So I don't have that set up really quick, but Heiko's alluding to some things we had chatted about a while ago. Let's say, like, I could do something like, watch, I'm going to pipe into AI. I can say, that was a fun movie, right? And then I can take that and pipe it into AI and say, what sentiment is this? Negative, neutral, positive. So I'm actually directing the model. Oh, I did it again. That's what happens when you change your stuff. We got it. I'm going to give it an instruction now. So I'm asking it to do sentiment analysis, which usually data scientists do. But all I'm doing is asking the question, what is the sentiment? And I'm saying I want it to be negative, neutral, or positive. So as you can see, the model took that sentence and then came back and said positive. That movie, that was a boring movie. So now what this is showing, so that's negative. That was a okay movie. Let's see if we can get a neutral out of it. So what I'm showing here is that you can actually take data that is yours, and then you can pass it to AI. So there you go. The sentiment of that statement is neutral. Now imagine if you had an entire spreadsheet, right? And it was a human resource spreadsheet, and it was a bunch of feedback from employees and whatnot, or it could be restaurants or whatever kind of, depending, or people working with your help desk, whatnot. And you can actually have a list of it in Excel. You can do an import Excel, get all those statements for each row, and then row by row, you can then pass it up to AI and say, what's the sentiment? And as it comes back, you can take that and put it back into the spreadsheet. So now you've actually done a sentiment analysis against all of your commentary about whatever department that you might be in. And I say that as not that you should think of like that's the only application of this, but maybe to plant seeds and saying, oh, use your imagination of how you can use this. So this opens up a whole new set of ways that you can work with information. Imagine trying to program this, right? Whether it be PowerShell or any other language. How are you going to know the word fun or boring or okay? Is it positive, neutral, or negative? And I would be here for days.
And I think the other day, I think we talked about that you could even now with the kind of how OpenAI is handling the data, you could in the background ask because early on you said there are some things in Python that is really well established and works very well for data analysis, which you could still trigger from your prompt, right? And it will be done with Python in the background.
That's a great point. So now part of let me just do a quick. I'm going to bring up the. So now I've exposed all this good stuff inside of the PowerShell module that I built. Okay, and what I'm going to do here, this is the playground. So if you put your $5 down on and you get a key, you also get access to their playground. So what I just did there is I just said create a new assistant, okay, and it's basically ready to go. And I can type in here, tell me about. I'm going to get to your Python piece in just a sec. Tell me about elephants. So this entire playground works on top of their SDK, similar to the way my AI works with the SDK that I ported from OpenAI. And you can see it's coming back and telling me about elephants, right? But what's really cool to Heiko's point, you see here, this is a thing called code interpreter. So when I enable that, okay, what that's actually going to do is when I run queries or I do prompts here, when this is enabled, it's actually spinning up Python in a Docker container in a sandbox environment on the OpenAI service. Does that make sense?
And that's really, I mean, this, as I said, this opens up a lot of new opportunities to combine, the best of both worlds, so to speak.
Absolutely correct. And when it spins up that Docker container with Python, it has a whole bunch of all the cool tools that Python people use. So now I have something called New Assistant, right? And I have something called Tools, and I can say enable OAI, and if I spell correctly, it'll be really helpful. And I can enable the code interpreter. And let's name this ScriptRunner. Okay, so now I just created that, and I can use it programmatically, or I can come up here. Let's do a refresh. And there's my ScriptRunner. And you can see that code interpreter's enabled already. So what that means, when I do certain kinds of queries in here, if I said, give the first 10 numbers of the, and I can't spell, but that's okay, AI can, Nachi series. Typically in the free versions of GPT, like GPT 3.5, and even some of the others, it won't get this answer right. Now, notice it kicks off the code interpreter. It's actually writing a program in Python and executing the program. So it spun up the Docker container, wrote the program, right? And here's the actual Python that it wrote. It ran it, and then it gave the answers. And the cool part is I can actually copy and paste this locally into my Visual Studio Code. Yeah. And for giggles, I'll do one more. Convert, and I'm not going to even spell it right, convert to PowerShell. And let's run that. And everything I'm doing here, how cool is that? So I just created a code interpreter, it generated a program, gave me the answer I wanted, then I want that program inside of PowerShell. And there you go. And all of that is completely doable from the command line. All those little interactions by saying, AI, give me XYZ, and you can actually create your own assistants and all that kind of stuff. But I'll have more detail on that when my book comes out.
All right, this is okay. So this is a great segue.
Sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So I think, So for people, getting into it and thinking about, okay, what is this all about? I think this is great. And for everything else, you have your videos and your YouTube channel, which we're going to have the links into, but that's really great. Thanks a lot. So, but as you just mentioned, the book, I will switch back to the view of the two of us. So, and so here we are back. Yeah. So before we get to the book, I wanted to ask you, like, okay, I mean, because you're working with all kind of AI stuff all day long. Sometimes I wonder if you even sleep when I see your posts that are getting published. So besides OpenAI and ChatGPT, you mentioned some other platforms as well. How would you, let's say, rank them? What do you or based, maybe it's based on specific purposes. So where do you see ChatGPT and the other in the landscape? That's of course a very moving target, but as from the, let's say, from today.
That's a great question. And it's a pretty complicated one to answer because we're used to software like, oh, are you using PowerShell 2 or are you using PowerShell 7? Oh, that's an easy choice. Upgrade. That's not the same thing in the world of AI with language models. And to the point of that, it's a constantly moving landscape. That is, I used to say that to people. That is an understatement. In the last 2 weeks, OpenAI has delivered like 8 new features, and it's like, I need to catch up to them, and they've got teams of people. So where is GPT? So you got Google Gemini, you got Anthropic that does Claude, Amazon has theirs, Meta has Llama. There's another company out of France that's doing Mistral, which is really great. There are other frameworks that take the LLMs, large language models, and they wrap them in some more good stuff, and they're making what they call agents out of them. Like you might have seen Devin the Coder, which can actually, you can say, hey, I want a program that does X, Y, Z, and it goes off and figures out a ton of things and then produces it's not just a straight prompt. So where does it fit? I see, this is my personal opinion, large language models like GPT-4 and Gemini and whatnot are commodities. Right? It doesn't matter. I can walk up to any one of them, prompt them, and I get basically the same answer. It's the user experience around the LLM that is becoming more important. So that's really hard to say, depending on what you're trying to do. So if you take Claude, for example, right? So when you see me typing in like AI, tell me about elephants, that's what they call a token window. Right? I have 128,000 tokens that I can put in there, and we won't talk about what a token is, but you can think about it about being several pages of stuff I could type, right? And then and it does a bunch of stuff. So that would be my limit. But if I walk over to Claude, it goes from 128,000. They have a 1 million token limit. And you might think, oh my God, I need 1 million tokens. Now the challenges is that if you give it 1 million tokens, which means you might be able to upload like 10 300-page PDFs and ask questions about it. That's really cool, but the model can't remember everything. So it's not going to be able to sit there and say, oh, I remember what I read in book 1. How does it relate to book 30? So while you can do that, and you could do some cool things above 128,000 tokens, the models are getting better, that they can remember things, and there's better techniques than that. OpenAI, GPT-4 class level models are the primo. And what they're providing us as consumers and developers is not being provided by the other folks yet, right? Gemini has their own way that they think people should use it. Meta has their own way, right? Mistral has their own way, which is all. So you have to really get down to like, let me try this out. Let me see what they have. And it gets challenging. So hope that answers.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and as you said, because it's so dynamic. So in 3 months, it might be different again, right?
I'm going to make the prediction that in the next 5 weeks. Why do I say that? So next week is Google I/O, right? That's their conference on the 14th. They're going to announce all kinds of AI stuff. On the 27th, 21st of May, so like a week after, MS Build is coming, right? So definitely sign up for Build. Well, this is not going to be out till after Build, but Microsoft Build, their thing is how is AI going to shape your future? That's the entire point of the Microsoft Build. 2 weeks after that is the Apple conference. We're going to see what they want to talk about in AI. And I guarantee by the end of the month and by the middle of June, OpenAI is going to answer anything that they come up with and take it to another level. So between now and August, it's going to be a lot of amazing stuff.
Absolutely. And probably including a new book. So let's come back to your little hints. So I think you're in the process of writing a book about all that awesome stuff, right?
Yeah, thanks for getting back to that. Yep. So Manning reached out to me a few times in the last year, and I said, yeah, okay, so it was about a couple of months ago, and I said, yeah, I think now's a good time to write. I think AI is slowing down. And like, oh, nope. And so we signed the contract. And then the other cool thing is Bruce Payette. Hopefully a bunch of people know who he is, but he, if you don't, he wrote PowerShell in Action. He was one of the founding members of the PowerShell team. He basically was the engineer behind the language of how it works. And I asked him if he would co-author it with me, and he agreed. So we started writing. Yeah, it's super cool. So we started writing a book about 4 weeks ago. We've got 2 chapters done, and in the sense, well, it's all drafts, and now it has to go through a whole bunch of stuff in the Manning typesetting and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to cover some of the thing I showed, like how do you build that AI function, right? How does it work underneath? How do you do prompting? How do you do chatbots? What else can you use this for? How can you use it for data scientist type stuff?
All right.
Yeah, so I don't know when it's going to come out. I want it to be a MEP as soon as possible, their early access stuff. But we'll see how everybody's schedule lines up.
Okay, but having already 2 chapters in draft is
definitely cool. It's awesome. I'm having a blast writing it. It's like, I think I've been preparing to write this book for 2 years, taking notes and whatnot. Now I'm just kind of like dumping it. And one of the best parts for me is I get to I meet with Bruce once a week. And we talk about, and I talk about not just the book, but I talk about a lot of stuff with him. Yeah. And he's willing, he fields my questions. And I said to him, like, this is like getting my Brucicillin once a week, because it's like, he has knowledge. Like he'll go, oh yeah, back in his 1956 paper that this person wrote about notation and language.
Yeah.
I go back and I read, like, oh wow, they were talking about the stuff back in the 50s.
Oh,
so it's really
crazy. Cool. That's what I read about in the Shell of an Idea book, where at the end someone said Bruce is the walking
encyclopedia.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's a tough word. That's a tough word.
Of programming, and he just knows everything. And I'm looking forward to meeting him in June at the European PowerShell conference.
I'll give you a plug. I was talking to him yesterday, and I said, yeah, I'm going to talk to Heiko on Friday. He goes, oh, great. He goes, man, I really love that ScriptRunner product. And he goes,
yeah, he made a great comment last year when he first, I showed it to him, and he made some great comments also in regards to Microsoft, which I won't repeat, but it's
yeah, he said Microsoft should have built ScriptRunner. Is one of the points.
Yeah, he phrased it kind of differently, but it was just kind of the same message. Yeah,
that'll be a separate conversation we have privately with some drinks and
yes,
it'll be awesome.
Absolutely. Doug, this was an awesome conversation.
Same here.
I think we covered a lot of stuff, and we could go on forever. So maybe there should be a part 2. Latest when the book is out, and maybe we have a conversation with the 2 of you, with Bruce and you together.
That'd be awesome. Tremendous.
That would be cool. But so for now, thanks a lot for the insights. I think it was really, really interesting and helpful, and hopefully get people more into number 1 PowerShell, and number 2 in all the stuff that you do around AI and your PSAI module, because it's awesome. And so thanks again for your time, and thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.